Welcome to Bible Talk Insight. We're here to take some really profound, sometimes challenging biblical topics, and we'll really explore them together with you.
And today, we're definitely tackling one of those challenging areas. We're zeroing in on something that causes a lot of friction for people.
Yeah, it's that image, isn't it? God as a divine warrior. How do we reconcile that with the God of, absolute love and mercy we see revealed, especially in Jesus?
Exactly, that's the core tension. We're looking specifically at the book of Joshua, chapters 5 and 6, the whole conquest of Canaan narrative.
Right, the commands for destruction. I mean, on the surface, it looks like pretty brutal ancient warfare, and that understandably raises some big ethical questions for any reader.
It really does. So our mission today really is to get beyond that surface reading. We want to offer a sensitive but also a theologically solid discussion.
We're going to try and frame these intense events in Canaan not as like isolated tribal conflicts, but more as a kind of miniature reflection, like a snapshot, you could say.
Yeah, a snapshot of a much, much bigger struggle. An enduring cosmic conflict that's ultimately about humanity's salvation and establishing God's justice.
It's a huge shift in perspective, isn't it? Moving from, the battlefields around Jericho to thinking about the entire cosmos.
It is, and we'll be leaning heavily on the Bible itself, of course, but also drawing insights from careful Bible scholars who've wrestled with these themes. Our aim is really to equip you, the listener, to feel more informed and maybe more comfortable navigating this difficult territory.
Definitely. And hey, before we properly dive in, just a quick reminder, if you find this kind of exploration valuable, please do subscribe to Bible Talk Insight. We bring these discussions weekly.
Yeah, subscribe now so you don't miss out. And stick around, because later we'll mention some bonus materials for those who want to go even deeper.
Okay, let's get into it. The crux of the problem, divine conflict.
Right. So first things first, we have to acknowledge it up front. Approaching Joshua is simply a book of war. It's sensitive.
It is. When you read about the harem, the command for complete destruction of Canaanite cities and people, the questions just jump out, don't they? Why would a loving God command that?
It's the central theological knot we need to untangle. We read about God's benevolence, his patience, his love, and then we see these military directives. It feels contradictory.
Yeah, you risk creating this kind of split personality for God, right? Like an Old Testament God versus a New Testament God.
Exactly. But the Bible scholars really push back against that kind of simplistic division. They insist we can't just isolate this period of history.
Okay, so what's the alternative view then? How do we approach it differently?
Well, the foundational idea they present is that we need a much wider lens, these battles in Canaan. They were never intended to be seen as just, regional fights over territory.
Okay.
They're described as earthly manifestations of the great conflict between God and Satan and between good and evil. That's the crucial universal context we have to start with.
So if you adopt that framework, that universal conflict, how does that change how we see the commands?
It shifts the purpose dramatically. It's no longer about, say, ethnic cleansing or random violence for its own sake. It becomes about something much bigger, restoring God's justice and love in a fallen world.
And sometimes restoring justice and love means, well, removing obstacles.
Removing profound obstacles, yes. Obstacles that actively corrupt and destroy life and prevent God's purposes from moving forward.
To really get our heads around the intensity in Canaan, you're saying we actually need to rewind way back.
Way back. Beyond Earth itself, actually, to the very origin of rebellion. The Bible is quite clear that this universal struggle, sometimes called the Great Controversy, it didn't start on Earth.
It started in heaven. Revelation 12 gives us that picture, right? War arose in heaven. It's hard to fully grasp.
It is. But understanding the nature of the first rebel is key to understanding the nature of the evil God was confronting in Canaan. We look at passages like Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28.
Ah, right. The descriptions of this powerful being. Lucifer, the day star, the anointed cherub.
Exactly. Initially described in stunning terms, full of wisdom, and perfect in beauty. But here's the tragic twist. Those very gifts became the source of his downfall.
How so? What was the mechanism?
Ezekiel 28 says that because of his beauty, his heart was lifted up, pride. And because of his splendor, he corrupted his wisdom. And that corruption led directly to violence.
So pride was the seed.
Pride was the genesis. Isaiah 14 spells out the ambition born from that pride. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High, that desire to usurp God, to be equal or superior.
Okay, so that's the root of cosmic evil. Pride, self-worship leading to corruption and violence. How does that connect directly to the Canaanites?
Because that same pattern of rebellion manifested intensely on earth in Canaanite culture by Joshua's time. We're talking about systemic corruption, practices like child sacrifice, ritual incest, extreme violence, things that fundamentally undermine the image of God and humanity and destabilize society. Their spiritual practices were deeply intertwined with this darkness.
So when God commands Israel to move into Canaan, it's not just about giving them land. It's almost like a quarantine, a necessary, targeted removal.
It's like a surgical strike, yes, against a localized but profoundly deep-seated pocket of corruption whose foundational principles, pride, corruption, violence, directly mirrored that original heavenly rebellion.
And the stakes were incredibly high, protecting Israel, the people through whom the Messiah would eventually come, from being totally contaminated and wiped out by this pervasive evil.
Precisely. So the issue isn't that God changes his character and suddenly becomes a warrior. The issue is that rebellion itself forces a response from divine justice. If cosmic evil exists and actively seeks to destroy, then cosmic justice must confront it, sometimes through conflict.
That reframes it significantly. Okay, so if this is a cosmic conflict playing out on Earth, then the leader can't just be Joshua.
Exactly. If Canaan is part of this bigger struggle, then the true leadership has to be divine. And that leads us straight into one of the most pivotal, really defining moments in Joshua's entire story. It happens right outside Jericho.
Okay, set the scene for us. Joshua 5.13, right?
Yeah. Jericho's gates are slammed shut, bolted tight. They're completely locked down against the Israelites. Joshua's probably out there, maybe scouting, definitely strategizing, thinking like a general.
Makes sense.
And it says he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. A mysterious figure, armed and ready.
So Joshua, being the military leader he is, reacts how you'd expect. He needs to know whose side this potential combatant is on.
Right. His question is logical, purely military. Art thou for us or for our adversaries? It's a binary choice in any human conflict, friend or foe.
But the answer he gets isn't binary at all.
Not in the slightest. The commander's reply is profound, arguably one of the most important lines in the whole book. Nay, but as prince or captain of the host of Jehovah am I now come.
Nay. That one word just stops Joshua's question in its tracks.
It completely reframes the situation. Scholars pretty much overwhelmingly see this figure not as just an angel, but as a Christophany.
Meaning, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ himself.
Yes, the true general, the divine warrior leading this campaign.
Okay, that's a huge claim. What's the evidence in the text that points to this being more than an angel, being divine?
There are two key pieces right there in the passage. First, look at Joshua's immediate reaction. He doesn't just stand there. He fell on his face to the earth and did worship.
And worship is reserved for God alone. Right. Angels in Scripture always refuse worship.
Exactly. Humans are explicitly told not to worship angels. The fact that this commander accepts Joshua's worship points strongly to his divinity.
Okay, what's the second piece of evidence?
The second piece confirms his divine authority and holiness, and it links him directly back to Moses' encounter at the burning brook.
Don't tell me. The shoes.
The shoes. The commander issues that sacred command. Put off thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy.
Wow. Same command, same implication of holy ground in the presence of the divine. That confirms his authority over the whole mission.
Absolutely. So let's go back to that nay. What does it really imply? The commander is essentially saying, Joshua, you're asking the wrong question. The issue isn't whether I'm on your side.
The issue is whether you are on my side.
Precisely. This isn't your mission that I'm here to support. This is my divine campaign, and you need to align with me. The whole focus shifts from human strategy to divine leadership.
And Joshua gets it immediately. His response is total submission.
It's perfect. His next words are the model, what saith my Lord unto his servant. He's not asking for military tips or battle plans.
He's asking for orders. He's yielding complete control.
Complete control. He recognizes the ultimate commander and submits the entire operation, strategy and all to him. And that ensures the victory, when it comes, belongs solely to God. No room for human pride or boasting about military genius.
And the relevance for us today is, well, it's pretty direct, isn't it? When we face our own spiritual battles, the daily grind against sin and temptation, the question isn't, is God going to help me achieve my goals?
No. The real question is always, am I aligning myself, my goals, my life, with his overarching mission? Am I on the commander's side? It's about submission to his leadership. #Tag 3, the nature of divine intervention.
Okay, so this submission to the ultimate commander, it naturally leads us to look at how God actually intervenes in these conflicts. This wasn't just Israel fighting for God.
Yeah.
It was clearly God fighting through and for Israel.
Absolutely. The text is full of examples showing God's direct active participation. This was far beyond just boosting morale or giving good advice.
You think back to the Red Sea, right? Exodus 14. Moses tells the terrified Israelites basically, don't panic, stand still, watch God fight for you. You just need to be quiet.
Exactly. God explicitly takes ownership. Jehovah will fight for you. He doesn't say, I'll help you fight. He says, I will fight.
And then, of course, the most famous example from Joshua, Jericho itself.
Jericho is the ultimate case study, isn't it? Joshua 6. The battle plan makes zero military sense.
Right. March around silently for 6 days, then 7 times on the 7th day, then everyone shouts. It sounds bizarre.
Militarily absurd. But that's the point. When they obey, the text says, the wall fell down flat, not crumbled, not breached flat. That required a direct, supernatural act of God.
So the fall of Jericho demonstrated 2 crucial things then.
I think so. First, absolute obedience to God's instructions, even when they seem illogical or nonsensical by human standards, is paramount.
Okay. And second,
Second, the victory was entirely undeniably dependent on divine action. No human army, no siege engine, no brilliant strategy could replicate what happened at Jericho. It was God's victory, plain and simple.
this really reinforces that idea of a layered conflict we talked about earlier. It wasn't just physical combat.
No, it was physical and spiritual. This layering becomes crystal clear when you look back again at the Exodus, specifically the plagues against Egypt.
You mentioned this before, the judgment on the gods of Egypt.
Yes, Exodus 12 is incredibly explicit about it. When God sends the final plague, the death of the firstborn, he says it's against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments.
So the physical plague was also spiritual warfare.
Directly. Think about it. Egypt's powerful pantheon Ra, the sun god, may be challenged by the darkness. Nile gods challenged by the river turning to blood. Fertility gods challenged by the death of livestock and firstborn. Each plague can be seen as a targeted strike against the demonic powers Egypt worshipped.
Deuteronomy 32 even says the nations were sacrificing unto demons, not to God. So this clash with demonic forces was a recurring theme.
It was, which confirms what the Bible scholars argue. Israel's divinely sanctioned wars weren't just like the cosmic conflict, they were part and parcel of the same controversy. The enemy wasn't merely the Canaanite soldier in front of them.
It was the underlying spiritual power structure, the same rebellion that began in heaven, manifesting through that culture.
Exactly. And this brings us inevitably back to the really difficult part, the command for Hiram, the extermination of the Canaanites.
Yeah, how does this cosmic view help us understand that?
Viewed through this lens of cosmic justice, that command, as harsh as it sounds to our ears, serves as a kind of foretaste of the end-time final judgment. It's God acting in his role as the ultimate judge against entrenched, destructive evil.
But why then? Why not sooner or later?
That requires understanding God's patience, his long-suffering. God often allows evil to develop, to ripen, to reach what the text calls a determined limit before he executes judgment.
Like in Genesis 15 with Abraham, God says his descendants won't get the land yet because the iniquity of the Amorite Canaanites is not yet full.
Precisely. God waits centuries, literally 400 years, allowing the Canaanites every opportunity. But their chosen path led to such profound depravity, such systemic violence and corruption, including horrific things like child sacrifice, that they reached a point of no return, a point where their culture actively destroyed life and blocked God's restorative plan.
So the waiting establishes God's justice and patience. He doesn't act impulsively.
Right. Then, when judgment finally comes through Joshua, it's a localized historical application of the same principle of justice that will ultimately be applied universally at the end of time.
You see echoes of this in Revelation, right? The final judgment, Armageddon.
Absolutely. Revelation 16 portrays Armageddon not as a literal place, but as the final, decisive, worldwide spiritual conflict, the ultimate defeat of the satanic trinity and all forces, human and demonic, that oppose God. The Canaan campaign, in its own way, foreshadowed that final confrontation, showing that God will ultimately deal with persistent, destructive evil to establish his kingdom of justice and love. #4, the second best experience.
Okay, this adds layers, definitely. But it still feels harsh. Which brings up another important concept Bible scholars discuss, this idea of a second best experience. Was war always God's preferred plan for Israel entering Canaan?
That's a really crucial question to ask. When you look at the initial Exodus narrative, God's stated purpose is clear: lead them out of slavery and into the promised land, Exodus 3:8, bringing them to a land flowing with milk and honey.
Okay, the ideal goal.
Yes. And there's strong scholarly thinking, based on other Exodus texts and God's character, suggesting that his ideal plan, his plan A, might not have involved all this fighting.
Really? Like, how would that have worked?
Perhaps something more miraculous, more like the Red Sea crossing repeated on a larger scale. If Israel had maintained perfect trust and obedience, maybe God would have removed the inhabitants supernaturally or caused them to flee, without Israel needing to engage in prolonged warfare. That seems more consistent with his desire for peace.
Okay, that's the ideal. But obviously that's not what happened. So what went wrong?
Well, human failure intervened. Almost immediately after the miraculous deliverance at the Red Sea, what did the Israelites start doing?
Murmuring, complaining. Exodus 17 talks about them testing God at Massa and Meribah.
Exactly. They fundamentally questioned God's presence and provision, asking, is Jehovah among us or not? Right after seeing his power unleashed.
That lack of trust, that questioning, it had consequences.
Direct consequences. This fracturing of the covenant relationship, this loss of faith, immediately preceded the first military attack against them. Exodus 17:8, Amalek attacked Israel at Rephidim.
You're saying that wasn't just random bad luck? The timing was significant.
Bible scholars make a pretty stunning connection here. They argue, quite directly, if the children of Israel had not murmured against the Lord, he would not have suffered their enemies to make war with them.
Wow. So God actually allowed the attack because of their murmuring. That sounds counterintuitive. Why would he do that?
The reasoning proposed is that the attack became a necessary, though not ideal, teaching moment. A corrective measure.
A pedagogical tool, as you said before.
Yes. They'd forgotten the lessons of Egypt and the Red Sea so quickly. They doubted God's power and presence. So God allowed this external threat, this war, so that Israel might learn to trust him again. The battle itself became the classroom.
So war wasn't plan A for getting the land. It became plan B, the second best way, forced by their own failure to trust.
That seems to be the implication. God always holds out the ideal, the path of perfect trust leading to immediate peaceful blessing. But he's also realistic about human nature. When we fail, when we choose distrust, he doesn't just abandon the plan.
He reconfigures the path.
He reconfigures the path. He works within the messy reality of our choices, even if that means using second-best methods like necessary conflict to ultimately still lead his people toward their promised destination.
Is there hope in that second-best scenario, then?
Absolutely. Because even within that less-than-ideal reality, God's method for victory remains the same. It depends entirely on him. Look closely at that first battle against Amalek.
Right, Joshua's down in the valley fighting.
But the outcome doesn't depend on Joshua's skill. It depends entirely on Moses up on the hill, holding up the rod of God, with Aaron and Hur supporting his arms.
A clear symbol that the power wasn't human effort, but divine intervention.
Totally. The victory came from above. And that's the critical link to Jericho and the rest of the conquest.
Even though the conquest was part of that second-best path, forced by earlier failures.
The victories, like Jericho's falling walls, still depended entirely on obeying specific, sometimes strange, divine instructions and trusting the ultimate commander, not on Israel's military might.
So whether it's the first battle after murmuring or the major campaigns later, success always hinges on reliance on God.
Always. And that's profoundly reassuring, isn't it? It tells us that God's commitment to getting us to our final destination, his ultimate kingdom, is so absolute that he'll even work through the consequences of our own faithlessness to achieve his purpose. He adapts the plan to our reality without compromising the final goal.
Okay, we started by connecting Canaan back to that original rebellion in heaven. Now let's pull the lens all the way out again. How does Israel's history, including these difficult wars, connect to the ultimate victory of Christ and the wrap-up of this whole cosmic story?
Right, we need to see the big picture finish. Revelation 12, with its stark statement, "Now war arose in heaven," really serves as the anchor. It confirms that the struggles God's people face on earth, like Israel's in Canaan, are echoes, earthly dimensions of this continuous, overarching, great controversy.
So how does Jesus' work fit into resolving this cosmic war?
The pivotal moment for understanding the shift towards resolution is Christ's return to heaven after his resurrection and ascension. Revelation chapters 4 and 5 give us this incredible throne room scene.
Yeah, the elders, the living creatures, the worship. But the focus lands on that scroll, right? The one sealed with 7 seals?
Exactly. That scroll is crucial. The dramatic tension builds because no one is found worthy to open it until the Lamb who was slain, Jesus Christ, steps forward.
And he takes the scroll. Revelation 5.7. What's the significance of that act?
It's loaded with meaning. In ancient Near Eastern practice, a king's enthronement often involved being invested with a document, a covenant scroll, the kingdom's laws, its history, its title deeds, sometimes called the testimony.
Okay, so Christ taking the scroll is like his official coronation, his confirmation as the rightful king.
Precisely. As the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, he alone has the authority. Taking that scroll demonstrates his supreme right to rule the universe, earned through his victory on the cross. And crucially, it gives him the authority to deal with any crisis that he might encounter. That scroll contains the plan, the history, the destiny of God's covenant people, and the resolution of the conflict.
So he takes the scroll, then what?
Then he begins to execute the contents of that scroll. That's what the opening of the seven seals in Revelation 6 represents. It kicks off the next phase of history, the period from Christ's ascension until his second coming.
And the seals describe, well, typical things, right? Conquest, war, famine, death, persecution.
Yes. These aren't necessarily God causing these things directly, but rather him allowing the consequences of sin and rebellion to play out within history while simultaneously working out his ultimate plan of redemption and judgment. The opening of the seals signifies Christ managing history, executing the covenant plan amidst the ongoing cosmic conflict.
So the struggles of God's people throughout history, including Israel's battles in Joshua, can be seen as part of these unfolding events triggered by the opening of the seals. Earthly consequences of Christ executing his plan.
That's a powerful way to connect it, yes. The events on earth are tied to the heavenly administration of the covenant by the enthroned Christ.
Therefore, those battles in Canaan weren't just ancient history. They were also prophetic.
In a sense, yes. They served as a historical precedent and a foreshadowing. Just as the Canaanites' iniquity reached its fullness, leading to localized judgment, the Bible indicates that global wickedness will eventually reach its limit, prompting the final, universal judgment.
Which culminates in
the ultimate spiritual conflict, symbolically called Armageddon in Revelation 16. This isn't about a specific geographical battle, but the final decisive confrontation where all opposition to God, human systems, and demonic powers, the very rebellion manifested in Canaan, is defeated.
And the final judgment itself, Revelation 20.
That's where the mystery of God is fully revealed and resolved. All beings see the justice and love of God vindicated. All opposition ceases. The divine warrior's actions in history, including the difficult ones in Joshua, are ultimately shown to be part of his unwavering commitment to eradicate evil permanently and establish his eternal kingdom of peace, justice, and love.
A kingdom guaranteed by Christ's enthronement, his taking of the scroll, and his ultimate final victory.
Exactly. It all connects back to him. Hashtag tag outro. So if we try to boil down this whole admittedly complex discussion, what's the core takeaway?
Well, it seems the wars in Joshua, as tough as they are to read, aren't just random ancient violence. They're framed as a necessary, maybe even second-best response from a just God.
Right. An intervention aimed at restoring justice, preserving the promised lineage, and showing the serious consequences of deep-seated cosmic rebellion, all before the final curtain call of judgment.
But the nugget that really sticks with me is that interaction between Joshua and the commander, that shift in perspective.
Yeah, the crucial point isn't whether the ultimate commander is backing our plans, but whether we are fully submitted, fully aligned with his plan, his cosmic mission. That's the posture he requires.
And understanding this, it really can shift how we see things.
Yeah.
It gives this profound assurance, doesn't it? The same divine power that miraculously brought down Jericho's walls, that power is still at work today.
Managing history, dealing with evil, and guaranteeing the final arrival of God's promised kingdom, that ultimate peace.
Which leaves us with a pretty powerful thought to chew on, maybe something for you to reflect on this week.
Go for it.
If the commander of the Lord's army demanded that Joshua remove his shoes right there on a battlefield, a place of imminent conflict and destruction, because the ground was holy in his presence.
What level of reverence, what depth of submission does that imply for us? As we navigate our own daily spiritual conflicts, how should we approach the commander?
Wow. That's a searching question. What does holy ground look like in our lives when we're facing our battles?
Something to ponder, for sure. Thank you so much for joining us today on Bible Talk Insight.
We really hope this exploration has been helpful. If you want to keep digging into these kinds of themes, please do subscribe to the show wherever you listen.
And definitely check out our bonus and supplemental episodes. We often go deeper into specific covenant themes and related prophecies there. You can find those on our channel and podcast feed.
Also, we'd love for you to join us on Bible Talk Insight on Facebook. It's a great place for daily encouragement and to discuss these ideas with a wider community.
We look forward to connecting with you there.
Until next time, may the incredible love and the solid truth of Jesus Christ be your guide and your light.
Subscribe now, stay curious, and we'll talk again soon on Bible Talk Insight.